The screaming didn't come from her. It came from the people watching. Janelle Davis just stood there, frozen, as the red-faced store manager pointed at her and yelled, "That's her! She put something in her bag." His voice was loud enough to make the other shoppers stop in their tracks. She was holding a notebook. That's all. A simple black spiral-bound notebook she hadn't even paid for yet. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside," the manager barked, already waving security toward her. Janelle blinked. "What?" "You heard him," a uniformed man said, grabbing her gently but firmly by the arm. Her mother appeared beside her, clutching a shopping bag and looking confused. "Excuse me? What's going on here?" "She's being detained for theft," the manager snapped, glaring at Janelle like she was already guilty. "I didn't take anything," Janelle whispered. The crowd was already forming. Camera phones were pointed. An older white woman whispered, "See?" I knew something was off about her. Janelle felt like the air had been punched out of her lungs. Her mother tried to speak, but the officer cut her off. "Ma'am, please step back." "She's 17. She's not even alone," her mother pleaded. "Let her explain." But no one wanted to listen. They pulled Janelle into a side room near the customer service desk. It smelled like stale printer ink and burnt coffee. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud. "Empty your bag," the manager ordered. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were her textbooks, her phone, a half-full water bottle, and a calculator. "And your pockets," the manager added. She turned them out. A few crumpled dollars, a lip balm, and her bus card fell onto the table. That was it. "No merchandise," the guard said quietly. "She must have ditched it," the manager insisted. "I saw her. She was acting suspicious." Janelle looked up, eyes glassy. "You didn't see anything." "I didn't do anything." The manager's jaw tightened. "We have to follow protocol. The police have already been called." "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice cracking. He didn't even respond. When the officer arrived, he was young. Nervous, even. "I'm sorry, miss," he said as he pulled out the cuffs. "They said you refused to cooperate. I have to detain you until this is sorted." Her mother burst into the room just as he clicked the metal around Janelle's wrists. "Wait, please. At least check the security footage." The manager shook his head. "We'll handle that later." Janelle couldn't speak, couldn't cry, couldn't even move. The cold metal dug into her wrists. The walk out of the store felt like a nightmare. Every eye was on her. One man muttered, "Typical." Her mother followed close behind, her voice shaking as she kept saying, "It's okay, baby. We'll fix this. We'll fix this." But Janelle wasn't sure anything could be fixed. At the station, they booked her without a second glance. "What's your name?" the clerk asked. "Janelle Davis." "Age?" 17. The camera flash for her mugshot burned into her memory like a scar. They fingerprinted her, printed a form, and stamped it with a dull thud. She looked down and read the words slowly, her vision blurry. "Court, State of Texas versus Janelle Davis." Her throat closed up. She wasn't a criminal. She was a straight-A student. She was supposed to start Howard in the fall. But none of that mattered now. Not to them. Not to anyone. The world outside kept moving, like nothing had happened. Inside the Davis household, everything was stuck. Janelle sat at the edge of her bed, holding the same notebook she never even got to buy. Her mom had insisted on paying for it after she got released on bond. The plastic security tag was still on it. Sunlight spilled across her walls, highlighting her acceptance letter to Howard University, taped proudly above her desk. "Congratulations, Janelle Davis. Welcome to the pre-law program." Now it felt like a cruel joke. Downstairs, her mom was on the phone with the lawyer. Her dad sat at the kitchen table, staring at a printed copy of the police report, like it might change if he read it enough times. None of them were talking much. Every sound felt too loud. Every silence felt like a warning. Janelle closed her eyes and tried to breathe. She used to love Saturdays. The family had routines. Dad made pancakes, Mom played old Motown records, and Janelle would spread her homework across the dining table, sipping on iced coffee like she was already in college. That morning had been just like any other. Her mom had teased her while she got ready, half laughing, half scolding. "Don't spend all my paycheck in one store, Miss Future Lawyer." "I just need a notebook," Janelle had replied, pulling on her jacket. "Maybe a new backpack. Finals are coming." "Buy what you need, not what's trending," her mom said, tossing her car keys. "I'm walking, Ma." Her mom paused. "Take the keys." "Walking's better for stress," Janelle joked. "Law school prep." Her mom had smiled. Always 5 steps ahead. That smile had faded when the police called 2 hours later. Janelle had always been 5 steps ahead. Until now. Her grades were perfect. Her teachers adored her. She was captain of the debate team, volunteered at the local library, and had just won a statewide essay contest on youth empowerment. She wasn't a troublemaker. She didn't even like conflict. The only fights she'd ever had were on paper, in essays, in mock courtrooms, and she always won. Because she had facts, proof, logic. But now? None of that had mattered. In the holding cell, they didn't care about her GPA. At the precinct, no one asked about her character. At the store, the manager saw a hoodie and a black girl holding a notebook. And he decided she was guilty. Her dad peeked into the room. He looked tired. Older. "You ate?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Not hungry." "Your mom's making grilled cheese. Want some soup?" "No, thanks." He stepped in and sat beside her on the bed. The silence stretched. "You know," he said, "I used to walk past this same police station when I was your age. On the way to my summer job. Always kept my head down. Always carried my wallet in my front pocket, just in case." Janelle looked at him. "Did you ever get stopped?" He smiled faintly. "Once, I was 14. Said I looked like someone they were searching for. I was just holding a bag of oranges." She stared at him, heart breaking. "I'm sorry, Dad." "I'm sorry too, baby." He stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Your brother called." Her heart jumped. "Marcus?" "He said he's checking in. That's all." Janelle nodded slowly. She hadn't told Marcus yet. She didn't want to worry him. He worked in D.C., somewhere in the Department of Justice. She never knew the details, only that it was important and confidential. He'd always been protective, always watching, even from a distance. They called him the quiet lion in the family. She didn't want to be the reason he lost focus at work, but something deep inside her was starting to crack. She picked up her phone. No unread messages. No missed calls. The image of the judge flashed in her mind. Cold, detached. Not even pretending to care. Janelle stared at her brother's contact. Her finger hovered. Not yet. She put the phone down and looked back at her college acceptance letter. She wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. But she was starting to understand something her textbooks never taught. In real life, the truth didn't matter unless someone powerful made it matter. And maybe it was time to stop waiting for fairness. Maybe it was time to fight. Janelle had never seen the inside of a courtroom before. She had imagined it, sure. Clean floors, rows of benches, maybe a strong voice saying, "Objection, Your Honor." She used to dream about standing at that podium one day, defending someone who had no one else. But not like this. Not with her name on the docket. Not with her parents sitting behind her, silent and shaken. And definitely not in front of a judge who didn't even look her in the eyes. Judge Evelyn Mathers, middle-aged, expression carved in stone, eyes unreadable. She barely glanced up as the bailiff called Janelle's name. Janelle stood. Her knees wobbled. She held a folder filled with character references, academic transcripts, and awards. A lifetime of being good. None of it mattered. The judge flipped through a thin file. Charges. Petty theft. Plea? Not guilty, Janelle said softly. The judge didn't blink. Acknowledged. Her attorney, a court-appointed man named Mr. Ellis, cleared his throat. He was old, disorganized, with files spilling out of his bag. Your Honor, we'd like to request access to the store's surveillance footage. My client maintains she didn't steal anything. The judge didn't even look up. Footage wasn't submitted with the arrest report. Motion denied. But motion denied. Janelle turned toward her lawyer, eyes wide. That footage proves I didn't do anything. He held up a hand as if to quiet her. The officer's statement supports the store's claim, the judge said, flipping another page. That's enough for probable cause. Your Honor, Mr. Ellis tried again, this is a 17-year-old with no prior record, accepted to Howard University. I read the file, the judge snapped. We'll set a preliminary hearing for 2 weeks from now. Bail remains at $4,000. Her mother gasped. Her father leaned forward. We barely posted that much last time. Can it be reduced? Denied. The gavel struck once. Just like that, it was over. Janelle stood there, shaking. She didn't understand. She hadn't stolen anything. She hadn't resisted. She hadn't even raised her voice. And still, she felt like the enemy. Outside the courtroom, her parents argued with Mr. Ellis in whispers. She's innocent, her mom said. Why aren't you fighting harder? Mr. Ellis sighed. I'm doing what I can. Judges like Mathers don't budge unless you've got real firepower. She didn't even ask for the video, her father said. Is that legal? It's discretionary, the lawyer replied. Unfair, sure. Illegal, not quite. Janelle stood off to the side, her fists clenched at her sides. Discretionary. That word would haunt her. She wasn't a person in that courtroom. She was a checkbox, a case number, a possible defendant. And the judge had already decided she was guilty. 2 weeks. That's how long she had to wait until the next hearing. 2 weeks of living in fear. 2 weeks of wondering if her scholarship would be revoked. She barely ate, barely slept. Her parents tried to be supportive, but every time the mail came, her mom flinched. Every time the phone rang, her dad jumped. The silence in their home grew louder with each passing day. The night before the hearing, Janelle lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her future, about the courtroom, about the judge's cold expression. She thought about Marcus. She hadn't called him. Not yet. He had always told her, only call if it's bad. Really bad. She used to joke that he worked for the Avengers, He never told her what exactly he did, just that it involved government files, security clearances, and people who didn't like being told no. She picked up her phone again. Her hands trembled. Still, she didn't press the call button. Next morning, they drove to court in silence. Her mom clutched her rosary. Her dad tapped the steering wheel nervously. Janelle felt like she was being marched toward something she couldn't escape. Inside the courtroom, everything looked the same. Judge Mathers entered. Mr. Ellis stood beside her. This time, the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman with red lipstick and an air of entitlement, stepped forward confidently. Your Honor, based on updated information, the state is escalating charges to felony theft. Gasps rippled across the room. Janelle's knees buckled. Felony? Her dad whispered. How is that even? Mr. Ellis fumbled. That's absurd. The item wasn't even recovered. We'll let the jury decide, the judge said coldly. Janelle couldn't breathe. Felony meant prison. Felony meant no scholarship. Felony meant her future. Gone. She looked at her lawyer, at the judge, at the prosecutor smirking from the other side. She was drowning in the silence. That night, back home, Janelle didn't wait anymore. She picked up her phone, opened Marcus's contact, and hit send. Her message was simple. Marcus, I need you. Now. Marcus Davis didn't need an explanation. When he saw his little sister's name flash on his phone with just 4 words, Marcus, I need you. Now. He didn't ask why. He didn't wait. He stood up from his desk in Washington, D.C., tugged off his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and called one person. Caleb Rock. Temporarily assigned to Phoenix? Marcus asked without greeting. Caleb's voice was dry but sharp. Yeah, what's going on? My sister's being railroaded by a judge in Houston. She's 17. Charges went from petty to felony. Over nothing. Caleb didn't hesitate. Name of the judge. Evelyn Mathers. A pause. Then a low whistle. She's still on the bench? Marcus's voice went cold. I want eyes on her courtroom in the next 30 minutes. I want her disciplinary record pulled. I want every complaint ever filed against her. Anything sealed, unsealed, or buried. Caleb didn't argue. Give me 30. Marcus hung up. His office overlooked the Capitol dome. He barely glanced at it. He wasn't thinking about politics or process. He was thinking about Janelle. He was thinking about the last time he held her hand. The day she got her acceptance letter. She'd cried in his arms. Told him she was going to make a difference in the world. Now she was a defendant. And he knew exactly the kind of courtroom she had just walked into. Meanwhile, back in Texas, Janelle sat quietly in her room. Her parents hovered nearby, confused by her sudden calm. Did you tell Marcus? Her mom asked softly. Janelle nodded. Yeah. Is he okay? Janelle didn't look up. He's working on it. Her dad sat on the edge of the bed. Working on what? She finally looked at him. Making them care. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. A tall man in a sharp navy blue suit stepped inside like he owned the room. He flashed a DOJ badge so fast it didn't even register fully. Miss Davis? Janelle nodded slowly. Caleb Rock. I'm here on behalf of your brother. Her mother gasped. Her father stood frozen. Caleb offered a calm, practiced smile. I need to hear everything. Start from the top. Don't leave anything out. Janelle recounted it all. The store, the backpack, the accusation, the courtroom, every tearful moment, every slammed gavel, every ignored request for footage. Caleb scribbled in a notebook like his life depended on it. Her parents filled in the rest. Their voices were low, choked. When Janelle finished, Caleb leaned back and tapped his pen. "Judge Mathers," he said softly. "Now it makes sense." "What do you mean?" her father asked. "She has a history. Your brother found it already. I'm just confirming the details." "What kind of history?" Janelle's mother asked. Caleb looked up. His eyes were sharp now. "The kind that doesn't survive daylight." He stood up. "I'm filing an emergency motion right now. That surveillance footage is coming out before the next hearing. No matter what it takes." Janelle swallowed hard. What if she says no again? Caleb gave a faint smile. Then she'll be answering to someone much higher than the state. He walked out with a purpose, already dialing. Back in D.C., Marcus received the call. "She's dirty," Caleb said. "We've got 3 buried complaints, 2 of them from black minors charged with no evidence, surveillance ignored, defense blocked. Same pattern." Marcus didn't flinch. "We go public. I want a federal review initiated. Internal Affairs, Judicial Conduct Division." "Already filed," Caleb replied. "You're up next." Marcus didn't wait for a press conference. He didn't prepare a statement. He drafted one sealed letter, signed it, and handed it directly to the Deputy Attorney General. By noon, the Department of Justice had issued a quiet but official notice. A federal investigation had begun into courtroom practices under Judge Evelyn Mathers. The news hadn't hit the public yet, but inside the courthouse, people were already whispering. The clerks, the bailiffs, even the other judges. And Judge Mathers? She hadn't even seen it coming. But Janelle felt it. Something had shifted. For the first time since her arrest, she saw her parents smile. Just a little. It wasn't over. But the storm was coming. And this time, it wasn't coming for her. Judge Mathers didn't know it yet, but the clock had started ticking. Back in D.C., Marcus's team moved fast. They pulled sealed files, internal memos, and disciplinary reports so old they were practically fossilized. And what they found wasn't a pattern. It was a blueprint. 3 black teens, all under 18, arrested without evidence. In each case, Judge Mathers refused to admit surveillance footage. Each defendant had clean records. 2 were sent to juvenile detention. 1 was pushed into a plea deal without legal counsel present. The cases had been buried, misfiled, lost in the paperwork of a broken system. But not anymore. Marcus compiled everything into a classified report and sent it directly to Internal Affairs. He didn't add commentary. The facts were ugly enough. Meanwhile, in Texas, Caleb Rock was making moves of his own. He filed the emergency motion before lunch, marched straight into the clerk's office, and handed it over himself. The clerk, a nervous woman named Denise, hesitated when she saw the name on the paperwork. "You're going after Judge Mathers?" she whispered. "Not me," Caleb said. "The Department of Justice is." Denise bit her lip. "You didn't hear this from me. But people here have been talking about her for years." "Then maybe it's time someone listened," Caleb replied. Denise disappeared into the back, and 10 minutes later, Janelle, her parents, and their lawyer were summoned into an impromptu hearing. Judge Mathers was waiting behind the bench, her face stiff, her mouth set in a thin line. The courtroom wasn't as full this time, but the tension was thicker. Caleb stood beside Janelle. Her old lawyer, Mr. Ellis, had quietly stepped aside. No one blamed him. Your Honor, Caleb began, voice calm, we respectfully request the immediate release and court review of all surveillance footage from the incident at Haverford Supply. You're not the counsel of record, the judge snapped. I'm here on behalf of the Department of Justice, Caleb replied smoothly, and the U.S. Attorney General's office. The courtroom fell dead silent. Janelle's parents stared in disbelief. Mathers's knuckles went white. On what grounds? On the grounds that this court has repeatedly denied access to material evidence in multiple juvenile cases involving minority defendants, Caleb said, including this one. I won't tolerate accusations in my courtroom, she hissed. They're not accusations, he said. They're facts. She banged the gavel once. This motion is under review. We'll reconvene. Respectfully, Caleb cut in, we're not asking for your permission. The DOJ has already opened a formal inquiry into your courtroom. Mathers froze. She stared at him like he'd just thrown gasoline on the floor. Then she stood so fast, her chair nearly toppled. Court adjourned, she snapped, and stormed out. Outside, the news hadn't broken yet, but inside the building, things were already shifting. Bailiffs whispered near water coolers. Court reporters glanced nervously at each other. The DA's office had started pulling its files, just in case. Janelle walked out of the courtroom into a hallway that didn't feel so heavy anymore. She turned to Caleb. Did we win? He shook his head. Not yet. But she's rattled. And that's a start. Later that afternoon, Caleb's phone buzzed again. He checked the screen, smirked, and handed it to Janelle. It was Marcus. A text with just 4 words. Start the next move. Caleb nodded. You ready for what's next? Janelle hesitated, then said, Yeah, let's finish it. By the end of the day, Marcus had arranged for a formal DOJ press briefing. The Internal Affairs Division was already combing through every ruling Judge Mathers had issued in the past 5 years. Behind closed doors, panic had started spreading. Emails were deleted, files retracted. Judges whispered to each other like rats before a flood. And the media? They were circling. Someone had leaked the probe. That night, Janelle sat at her kitchen table while her parents silently made dinner. Her mother's hands trembled as she stirred a pot. Her father scrolled through his phone, reading headlines out loud. Federal probe into Texas, judge over racial bias. DOJ investigating systemic misconduct. Evelyn Mathers under fire for buried juvenile cases. Janelle stared at the screen. Her own face was there, blurry, taken from a courtroom camera. Below it, one line stood out. Teen's case triggers national inquiry into racism in Texas courts. She didn't smile. Not yet. But she did feel something settle in her chest. Not revenge, not anger. Just the slow, steady sense that finally, someone was listening. The atmosphere in the courthouse was electric. Judge Mathers entered the courtroom like she was walking into a lion's den. Her back was stiff, her face rigid with defiance, but there was something different in her eyes today. Fear. She wasn't used to being afraid. "Call the docket," she snapped at the bailiff, her voice a sharp crack through the air. Janelle stood at the defendant's table, her palms sweaty but steady. Her parents sat behind her, their faces hard, waiting. Today wasn't about asking for fairness anymore. It was about showing that they would not back down. The prosecutor walked up to the table, her eyes darting nervously to Judge Mathers. Janelle felt the weight of every set of eyes in the room. The reporters, the lawyers, even the court staff knew something was off. The air felt heavy, like it was waiting to explode. And explode it did. Caleb Rock stood up, his briefcase snapping shut with a deliberate finality. He turned to face the judge, his voice calm but cutting. "Your Honor, I request that this court immediately dismiss all charges against Miss Janelle Davis, based on the new evidence provided by the U.S. Attorney General's office, and a federal investigation into systemic misconduct within this courtroom." The room went silent. Every person in the courtroom held their breath. Janelle's heart pounded in her chest as she felt the weight of Caleb's words settle in. Federal investigation. She wasn't dreaming. It was real. Judge Mathers's eyes narrowed. "I will not tolerate interference in my courtroom, Mr. Rock," she spat, her voice icy cold. "Then you'll have to tolerate me, Your Honor," Caleb replied smoothly, "because we're not leaving here until we've exposed the truth." The judge's face flushed a deep red. Her hands trembled as she gripped the sides of her bench. "Motion denied," she said in a low growl. "The charges stand. This court will proceed as planned." Caleb didn't flinch. He simply moved forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "No, Your Honor," he said, his voice now a quiet fury. "You've crossed a line, and today the Department of Justice will ensure you pay for it." Her gavel came down hard. "Enough!" But Caleb wasn't done. He stepped forward, placing a thick stack of documents on the table in front of her. "These are copies of sealed complaints against your courtroom, Your Honor. These are from the last 5 years. Multiple cases of racial bias, suppression of evidence, and deliberate negligence in handling black minors. If you don't want to look at them, I suggest you make time to read them later, because the press is waiting for your response." Janelle's parents stared, wide-eyed. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, her father's fist clenched at his side. And Janelle? She could barely breathe. She wasn't sure whether to feel hope or terror. Judge Mathers's face twisted in disbelief. Her eyes darted to the pile of documents, then to Caleb, and then to the door. She was trapped. The walls were closing in. "What is the meaning of this?" she hissed. "I will not be threatened." "You already were," Caleb replied, his voice sharp. "By your own corruption. This case is over, Your Honor." Her gavel slammed down again, but it was too late. From outside the courtroom, the whispers had begun. One by one, reporters filed in, their phones and cameras held high, snapping pictures of the papers laid out on the defense table. The judge's face was redder than before. Her jaw clenched tight, and her hands shook as she gripped her gavel. The pressure in the room was unbearable. "We are calling for an immediate federal review of this case," Caleb continued, "and the investigation into Judge Mathers' conduct will now move into public scrutiny." Judge Mathers gripped the edge of the bench. She could feel the walls closing in, the pressure of the law tightening around her neck. She finally broke. "I will not tolerate this," she muttered, standing abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. "You already have," Caleb said quietly, with a finality that seemed to echo through the room. "This is your last chance, Judge. Do what's right." The room fell silent. Judge Mathers took one last look at the papers in front of her. Her face was a twisted mask of frustration and rage. Finally, she slammed her gavel down, the sound ringing through the courtroom like thunder. "This court is adjourned," she said, her voice barely audible. Janelle blinked, still in disbelief. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then came the words that would change everything. "Charges dismissed. Federal investigation pending. Court is adjourned until further notice. The room erupted. Janelle's mother burst into tears. Her father held her close, both of them sobbing in relief. Janelle stood there, frozen in place. It was over. Not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been wronged in that courtroom, for everyone who had ever suffered under the weight of an unjust system. This was the moment. Her moment. And it wasn't just her victory. It was the victory of everyone who had been silenced, ignored, and abused by those who thought they had power. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Marcus. "You did it." The day Janelle walked out of the courthouse, the world felt different. Her legs felt shaky, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was freedom. She had just been handed her future back, and she was finally beginning to understand what that meant. Her parents walked beside her, their faces glowing with disbelief and relief. Her father, usually the calm one, had tears in his eyes. He tried to hide them, but it didn't matter. Janelle felt like she was walking in someone else's shoes, someone who had already won. But the victory wasn't hers alone. As they stepped outside into the sunlight, they were greeted by a sea of reporters. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in their faces. Janelle didn't flinch. She had been through worse. She'd been falsely accused, chained in a cold room, laughed at in court, and then ignored by everyone who should have helped her. But today? Today, she was the one holding the power. Her heart pounded as she stood there, facing the crowd. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders, but she stood tall, breathing in the air that suddenly felt lighter. She turned to her parents, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to make this count." Her mother nodded, holding her tightly. "We know you will." Janelle stepped forward, alone for the first time. "Miss Davis, what are your thoughts on Judge Mathers stepping down?" one reporter shouted. Janelle looked around, the words weighing heavily on her lips. Judge Mathers is not the only one who needs to be held accountable. This is a system that allows people to get away with things like this every day. It's time for change. It's time for all of us to stand up and say no more. Her words echoed through the crowd, powerful and raw. Her phone buzzed again. It was Marcus. "You did it, Janelle. We both did." She smiled, the warmth spreading through her chest. She had done it. Later that evening, her family sat together around the dinner table, a quiet peace settling in the room. It was the first time in days they had eaten together without the weight of fear hanging over them. Her mother placed a plate in front of her, and they all dug in without speaking. But words weren't necessary. Janelle wasn't the same person she had been when she first walked into that courtroom. She was stronger, wiser, and most importantly, she was free. The next day, as she walked down the sidewalk in front of her house, a familiar figure appeared in the distance. Marcus. He was standing outside her front door, dressed in casual clothes, his usual sharp suit replaced by something more relaxed. He had a slight smile on his face as he watched her approach. She stopped in front of him, crossing her arms. "You didn't have to come all the way here." Marcus shrugged. "I wanted to see you. You did good, Janelle." She smiled faintly. "It wasn't just me." "No," he agreed. "But you were the one who made sure they listened." She stared at the ground for a moment, then looked up. "What happens now?" Marcus's smile faded. "Now? Now we keep going. There's a lot more work to do." Janelle nodded. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't backing down anymore. Later that week, Janelle was back at her desk, organizing her schoolwork and setting new goals. She had received her letter of confirmation from Howard University once again, and it wasn't just because of her grades. It was because of her fight. And now, Janelle Davis was ready to fight for something bigger than herself. Her voice was finally heard, and she wasn't going to stop until everyone else had the same chance. But there was one last thing that lingered in her mind. She stood at the edge of the ocean one evening, staring at the waves crashing on the shore. The air was cool, and the sun had just begun to dip behind the horizon. Her phone buzzed again. It was a text from her mother. "We're so proud of you, baby. You're going to change the world." Janelle smiled, her heart swelling. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know how long this battle would take. But she knew this. The world had already started to change. And she was going to make sure it never stopped. Her story was no longer hers alone. It was for every person who had been overlooked, for everyone who had been silenced, and for everyone who dared to fight for something better. Janelle Davis wasn't done yet. She was just getting started.